Welcome to Disrupt to Shift, transforming and empowering the human spirit. Our mission is to inspire change, push boundaries, and lead a journey towards fearless healing and wholeness. Our hosts are Darlene Brown, Dan Gilman, Knute Birch, Deidre Boswell, Michael Dale Campbell, and Janine Witcher.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happen to be watching Disrupt to Shift. My name is Michael Campbell, and it is my pleasure to be here with a very interesting guest that actually helps people to make breakthroughs in their lives with some of the fundamental things that many of us take for granted. As we all know already, but it's worth mentioning that our vision is the transformation, the renewal, and the empowerment of the human spirit. I can't tell you how much that means to me. And our guest today is actually right on the same wavelength with us. You see, we exist to help others disrupt the norm. I'd like to introduce you as you bring her to the stage, Dr. Suki Stone, none other of Stone Educational Systems. And guess what? She has a fascinating program called Write, Read, and Lead. Watch the transformation occur as she comes to the stage. Dr. Suki Stone, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Such a wonderful, exciting opportunity. We met a couple of moons ago, right? Yeah. And it was just a wonderful experience to realize that you are in a different way in the transformation business. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do, just, how you approach transformation, and maybe give us an example of what that felt like or sounds like?
Well, my transformation came in the area of literacy.
Yes.
When I worked with children with special needs. And I've been working with these children for, not the same children, just for 50 years.
Yes.
But back about 40 years ago, I came across a young girl, second grade child, who was struggling to read. And she couldn't even read her name on a 3x5 card that was written.
Wow.
And everything that I used didn't make her go forward, didn't change her at all. And most of the time she just cried. And so I really was frustrated. And because prior to that, nobody in my classroom actually left the classroom without learning to read.
Wow.
And Julie had this incredible interest in reading, but just couldn't do it no matter what I used. So I actually prayed and said, I need some help. And I did have a master's degree. Now I have my doctorate, but I did have a master's degree at that time in special ed. And so I just went all over any kind of research. But I did something that was in my heart, really, and in my soul. The next day, I asked her to do a collage of things that she loved. And I had a series of magazines. And I said, cut out all kinds of things in the magazine that you really, really love, that you are passionate about, and make this collage. And she started with a bank. And she had the whole collage put together with all kinds of pictures. But we discussed holistically, which is what I learned in my master's degree about holistic constructivism. And I gave her whole words like teller or savings accounts or whatever the bank people did. They saved money. So savings came in. And she read all of these words holistically. And then we would go to the next picture, and she stopped me and she said, Miss Stone, there's another kind of bank. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure exactly what she's about to tell me. And I said, okay, Julie, what other kind of bank? And she said, when you go fishing, you sit on a bank.
Wow.
And I was overjoyed. And I thought, oh my gosh, her personal knowledge is going to teach her to read.
So let me catch this for a second, because this to me is revolutionary when we think about what's going on in education today, especially in the United States and most of North America, is really you skipped the phonics, you skipped the letter sounds, and this is a student who was actually struggling, was not reading even her own name, but she was now learning holistically, you're saying, to read words, skipping over those so-called fundamental steps. And so what was the result of that? Because now you tapped into something that she was interested in. Her own knowledge was being used, as you said, to teach her. Well, how did that happen?
Well, what happened was my how do I explain it? But my belief system, my I don't know, it came from inside of me, that I realized that she had knowledge.
Yes.
And nobody gave her the opportunity to share that knowledge. Yeah. And even me, before I, prayed about this whole thing, and, I was doing the traditional reading programs with her. She would break my pencils. She couldn't pronounce the sounds. There were all kinds of things. And I tell people when I share this, that I even had to put a Kleenex box on her desk because she cried so much, she would blow her nose and just didn't. So I needed something that was more related to who she was as a person. And it came to me when she told me about the bank. Yes. And then when I asked her, I said, how do you know that? And she said, my dad takes me fishing every weekend.
Nice.
And that was what gave me the intuitive sense of this child. She's a second grader. She's 8. And she has knowledge, home knowledge from her experiences. And so I used her experiences to tell stories. And I looked and researched. I guess I have to say researchers that were holistic. And I found that the language experience approach, which is done in kindergarten to help children begin to see reading process, doesn't really go beyond kindergarten. So what I've done, and what I did with Julie, but what I've done as well is tell the children that they're the teachers and I'm their secretary.
That's an interesting concept.
They go home and they say, Miss Stone is my secretary. Like, where did this come from? But
so you let them take charge of their own learning is what I hear you. They're taking charge of their own content for learning. Got it.
Yes. And what I did as my reading program developed was I expanded their vocabulary. I expanded their comprehension. I expanded their spelling. And they were able to actually write a sentence because they dictated that sentence to me. So I showed them that this sentence takes a question mark because you're asking a question, or this sentence takes a period. And they worked with me to learn the skill sets. But the skill sets weren't first. The child is first.
Wow. Could I just pause on that for a moment? Because I see a thread happening. I see a thread unveiling as you're speaking. For one, you talked about the bank, and then that allowed you to discover something about that child's knowledge. She had some core knowledge that she was working with and from. And what is interesting now is that you're saying that they dictate to you. You get them to tell their stories, and then you use their stories to teach them how to read.
Yes. So writing comes before reading.
Interesting.
They write down. I mean, I am, like I said, I write the sentence and then they copy the sentence.
Yes. And so they're learning to read there. So what is the format? Because even as I hear you speaking, it sounds like you're working with a group of kids, or is it
No, it
one?
always is one-on-one, because each child and each adult
Yes.
have their own experiences.
Yes.
And they need to know, and I am working with children and adults that have not succeeded their whole lives, no matter how old they are, because they don't fit in. Of course, I don't fit in it either, but they don't fit in the actual skill sets that we are teaching in school.
Wow.
So that's why it has to be one-on-one.
One-to-one.
It has to be in person, because even though we kind of know each other, Michael, through the, we've never actually met.
Correct.
So my relationship with you is not the same as if we actually had an experience together.
That's right.
Where we were in person.
Yes.
And what happens to these children too, as well as adults, I have to tell you, is they really like the fact that I have 100% focus on them. What they say, what they mean, and I have to tell you a little sideline to that. I would ask the children about their passions.
Yes.
And one of the children that I dealt with, it was a third grader, and he liked sports. And I said, do you have a favorite sport? And his mom happened to be there, and she said something like basketball or something. And he looked at her and he said, no, I don't like that sport. And I said, what sport do you like? And he said, I like soccer.
Yes.
And the whole thing shifted because his parent actually learned from him.
Wow.
He was really interested in sharing with me. That can't happen as, how do I say, cohesiveness if you're on something like a Zoom or something like, it has to happen in person.
Right. Now, so you said earlier, you start with writing, I'm sorry, and they tell their story, you're their secretary, and then it moves on where they actually learn to read their own story, and that's the foundation of it. So the name of your program is Write, Read, Lead.
Once people are readers,
yes,
they can read anything they want. They can make judgments about things that they read, deciding whether they like it or not, deciding whether they want to act on something or not. That's how we get leaders, or we as readers become leaders. And that's where I got the actual name for the program.
So on flipping the tenor just a little bit, this seems like a bit labor intensive, but how effective is it?
It's wonderfully effective because they're sharing their lives, and I wouldn't say that it's labor intensive.
Okay.
Because it's fun. They're sharing their lives with me.
Interesting.
They can't wait to tell me what they know. Because in school, they don't get asked.
Wow. So, Dr. Stone, you are actually describing what this show is about. It's about disrupting the norm and shifting into something phenomenal.
Yes.
And you are an epitome of exactly the imagery that is described therein.
Right.
Disrupt to shift. How do you feel about that terminology, and how would you describe your business?
I'd never heard it before, and I like it because what happens to them is they literally shift their lives. If I can share I have many, 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 examples, but let me share an example of a man that I met when he was 33.
Yes.
And he graduated high school, but he worked his way up. He had a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And he literally was sweeping the floors, and he worked his way up to be an assistant manager.
Yes.
But his skills in spelling and writing were not very, very good. And they weren't effective. And as a manager, you have to be able to evaluate your sales force and say, you accommodated this client very well. Well, he told me that he would never learn how to spell accommodated because he couldn't spell cat. So I taught him my system of spelling accommodated. And before he came to me, he told me, we sat down to talk before he started the lessons. And he told me that his dream job was to be a manager of Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And his boss told him he could be an assistant manager forever, but he would never be a manager because he didn't have the skills to be a manager. And I taught him in the middle of like my lessons. We were doing like 14 days. And in the middle of my lessons, he called and said that he told his boss that he was taking my class. And he had to cancel our class because he was allowed to go and interview in a small Enterprise Rent-A-Car office outside of San Diego. It wasn't exactly in San Diego City. And I said to him, I only have one question for you. I said, after the interview is over, you have to call me. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till the next day. Call me tonight or whenever, the interview was. And I got a call at 8:00 that night. And he said, Dr. Stone, I got the job. And most recently, it's been 20 years. He's now 55 years old. And I looked at his bio on Instagram. He spent 17 years being a manager at Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Wow.
7 years being a manager at Coca-Cola Company. And now he's in his 3rd year managing his best friend's bottle company in San Diego. So he achieved his dream job.
So you disrupted the norm that he was living in. You entered his life in an amazing way to provide for him a mechanism, a methodology that would allow him to perform at a higher gear, at a higher level. You allowed him to open doors with those skills. How does that make you feel?
I was like overjoyed. I mean, every time I think of the kids this adult that has actually accomplished what their passions were and what their life, what they wanted to do with their life, that's really powerful. Very, very powerful. And I want to do that in all kinds of cases. And my company is nonprofit so that I can get help from outside and get help from donors so that I can achieve that by going different places in the country. And, one of the places was in Chicago to, work with the kids that you wanted me to do and, and eventually help by teaching my process to someone that will stay in the church and, work with the kids. But
that's right.
It's really just heartening to me, and it cheers me up and it makes me feel really, really special. And I can't explain, but like I said, I have many, many, many stories on my website. There's a little boy, Miles. His father wrote me a thank you note in my magazine. He's a teacher and he does play and does all kinds of other things, but he could not teach his son to read. And Miles also had a form of ADD, ADHD. And not only did he learn to read and is reading chapter books today, a couple of years ago, I worked with him, but he learned to play chess, and he enters chess tournaments, and you need to focus. So he's lost a majority of his ADHD to be able to focus on the moves in chess, and he's taught his brother to play chess, and he's just a happy character. He just loves everything he's doing now.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I do want to go back to something that you just passed very quickly over, and that's, you said something about 14 days. What is the significance of the 14 days? Is that a part of your program? What does that really do?
Well, what happened, and it was actually a colleague, more than one colleague, that talked to me several years ago about it. As I was working with the children, I work with them an hour and a half, sometimes a little bit longer for each session. And in 14 days, my session is usually, the stories are like 9 or 10 stories. So the other 4 lessons or 5 lessons, they actually transfer to a book of their age group and their development, and something that they couldn't read. And to sort of explain to you, I had a child that was a 9th grader, and because he couldn't read, his teacher allowed him to do the Diary of Anne Frank through a movie. And so all the questions that he could answer, he learned from the movie instead of the book.
Right.
And he said to me at the end, because I actually require them to choose a book that they've had difficulty reading, and we'll read it together to show them now they have the skills to read that book at their level. And he said, Dr. Stone, the book that I would like to choose is the Diary of Anne Frank. I never had to read it, even though I passed that theme, because I couldn't read at the time. And I'm still interested in reading the book. So we sat down and we read the book together.
Wow.
And so that's what it goes from their stories to actually a book of their level that they, had difficulty reading, or that, they struggled, but it was something they wanted to read. I have another story. I worked with, before I became nonprofit, I met a gentleman who had a grandson, and friends of his grandsons. And Lyle asked me to teach his grandson to read. And he said, would you teach his grandson's friends? And I said, I would be happy to. So I went to where they were living. They all lived in a group home, and they were in the emotionally disturbed classes. And one of the children was very, very emotionally disturbed when it came to reading. When he first was given his first book, like a first grader, open a book, he tore the pages out. And the teacher said, I can't give you a book anymore if you're going to do that. And what happened after he had lessons with me, he asked me, he said, Dr. Stone, will you help me to make a book cover? And I thought, how interesting. I wanted to do that. I had him talk to his teacher about finishing the book cover, but I said, Jose, why do you want to do that? And he said, well, my teacher has a library in the classroom, and I have Charlotte's Web that she has, and I really want to, and he learned the word covet from me. And he said, I really want to covet that book. Books are very, 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 very nice to have. And I want a book cover so that I can take care of the book.
Wow.
And she called me and she said, I don't know what you did to Jose, but he absolutely deserves to take out that book. And he showed me his book cover, and it was amazing that he wanted to take care of the book, because when he originally started, he tore all the pages out.
Wow. So I mean, again, disrupting the norm. All right. You're actually making breakthroughs by not using the traditional methods of reading instruction, scaling through many different layers, but you're actually going straight for the jugular, as it were, to grab a hold, right? To grab a hold of that opportunity to take advantage of what's going on already in that child's mind. And as I'm an education consultant, as you know, and it's just so heartrending.
I wanted to share with you too, so that people know I did create this reading program, but I used the work of 5 researchers. So Roach Van Allen is my language experience. Dr. Paulo Freire actually is the anchor, because he taught the migrant workers to read by asking them about hunger.
Yes.
There was a difference between being hungry and hunger.
Yes.
And how they worked around that. He actually taught them to read by asking them questions about their life experiences. So he became the anchor, and I didn't have him till I went to grad school, but I actually worked with him for 3 years in grad school. Wow. And then I said Roach Van Allen and Sylvia Ashton Werner, who wrote the book Teacher, and Grace Fernald, who did the visual, tactile, kinesthetic way, where she had children learn by tracing the words and doing. I do that through my spelling. So I have 5 researchers. I didn't just make this up, but I made it up on the foundation of these researchers, and I put it together in a sequential way so that they would have the sequence, but it would still be their own personal knowledge, and their words they would increase through the Roget's International Thesaurus. So I'm adding things to make their experience more, I guess, richer for them.
Yes.
Like I taught, I think he was like 10th grade, and he was reading like at a 4th grade level. And he wanted to talk about football. And he said, I love football. Well, he has enough skills to be able to know what love is. And so we turned the word love into predilection. So now his sentence becomes, I have a predilection for football.
Vocabulary lesson right on the fly, right? So let me ask, so how do people reach you, Dr. Stone, Dr. Suki Stone?
Well, they can reach me through my website, which is spelled like writing, WRITE.
Yes.
writereadlead.org, or they can email me, drstone@writereadlead.org.
Wow.
I also have, on my website, I have a magazine, the Write Read Lead magazine, and they can read the magazine online. And I have a book out too. It's called Rethink Reading Strategies.
Yeah. Wow. Rethink Reading Strategies. And I noticed also on your website that you have how you actually use the Roget's Thesaurus.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a very integral part of what you do. And you also divulge the Write Read Lead secret, the child as teacher. And there's a lot of wonderful information on this website for our viewers and listeners to go to. Dr. Stone, is there anything you'd like to say in terms of disrupting the norm and shifting to actually discover and unveil and implement your potential?
I think that one of the things that we have lost is an understanding, and I'm saying as an educator, not as a parent, but maybe parents need to be listening as well. We've lost the fact that as parents, we bring knowledge to the children. And they have knowledge of their own just by being exposed to things within the family. So I would say that we as educators really pay attention to what children know and actually change them by acknowledging their knowledge.
Wow. So it's really connecting with the child at a cognitive level, also at an emotional level, to be
At a spiritual level.
and a spiritual level. Excellent. That's so wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I reach out to Dr. Stone. If you have a child, you know of a child that's struggling with reading, just reach out and let her listen and hear and learn about your child. She's very, very personal. I've had a chance to have several conversations with her in different settings, and it's a real pleasure, Dr. Stone, to have you with us today on the Disrupt to Shift.
This transformative journey would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. Their belief in the power of disruption and their commitment to fostering innovation have been instrumental in bringing these stories to light. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the sponsors for joining us in the mission to inspire change and drive progress. To be a potential sponsor, let's collaborate to keep this important conversation going. Together, we can all make a difference.